Hi everyone, this video is long overdue, but I've just been too busy with work and moving my family from Germany to California. Um, so yeah, let me introduce this car. So it's in the paperwork it actually said M3 Compact. Now, if you know your BMWs, then you know that BMW never actually made a M3 Compact. So this was actually a unique creation from a friend of mine. So initially I didn't know him that well, but through the process of buying the car from him and getting his tips and so on, we became friends. So the car was built by a friend called John. Um, he basically took a E46 compact, which was a car which maybe only existed in Europe, but so definitely didn't was not imported to the U.S. So he took this car, which was a 318 Ti to start with, and he transplanted all the M3 running gear into it. uh, so engine, brakes, suspension, gearbox, subframes, uh, differential, everything. So the advantage of the compact versus the regular M3 Coupe is that it is about 200 kilos lighter, from what I understand. The rear subframe issue um, is also doesn't affect the compact. So there's a very famous issue with E46 M3 and I think E46 in general, where the BMW didn't really do a good job of attaching um, the sheet metal in the vehicle body where the rear subframe attaches to the body, and therefore after a long time, if you drive the car very hard, then the the metal bodywork, the sheet metal starts to tear, and so there's um, so people often weld in these plates to strengthen that area. And but it's something that doesn't affect the M3 Compact. But okay, what was I on about? Right, yeah. So the M3 Compact is about 200 kilograms lighter, but if you'll see, it's missing the boot. And the significance of that from a vehicle dynamics point of view is that unfortunately you removed um, you remove the mass from the side that is actually helping you create traction. So the weight distribution isn't great. I think it ends up being about, I'm trying to remember, maybe 55, 45, or maybe even a bit worse. Anyway, so you got about 200 kilograms less, but it's all missing from the rear axle, and therefore the compact has a bit of a traction issue. And the other downside versus a regular E46 M3 coupe is that the you cannot run tires as wide, and that is actually, for a track car, quite a important uh, you know way to generate lap time. So I think in regular E46 M3 you can run 265 width tires front and back, but on the compact, the widest I could run without rubbing was 245. So obviously, if you modify the bodywork, install wider fenders, and roll the rear fenders or whatever, then you could, you know, fit wider tires in there. But using the standard compact bodywork, that was not possible. But despite that, thanks to the lighter weight, you can run lap times fairly similar to a normal E46 M3, with the main difference of having a much cheaper car. So especially, probably, yeah, so especially in Germany right now, if you want a clean, nice E46, the prices are ridiculous. But I think for compact, you can still get them for pretty cheap. And yeah, so that's definitely one reason. So if you just want to go, if you just want the speed of a E46 M3 without the amount of money tied up in the car, then the compact is quite a pretty good option. But of course, yeah, there's quite some work involved in doing the swap and getting that all through the into the paperwork. So um, unlike the U.S., where my impression is that, like, for example, here in California, from what I understand, vehicles have to go through a smog check every 2 years, but that's only checking the that's only checking the emissions of the vehicle. In Germany, it is much more in depth. The technical inspection that is done looks at the suspension, the brakes, interior, pretty much everything. And if something doesn't, is not safe or not done properly, then it won't pass. So I'm pretty sure John had a heck of a time getting the E46 M3 compact registered like that. And literally in the title, there were several. It was like several sheets describing in very fine detail all of the many changes that were done to the car. And so it's only by having it like that that the vehicle is road legal. Um, okay, that's a bit of a long story, but I thought it was worth telling because it was such a special car, and I really do miss it. Um, so let's now start talking about racetrack setup for this car. So when I went on the very first track day with it, I it was quite unexpected. I had meant to take the E91 330D, but due to some issues, because that car is also quite modified, there were some issues that needed to be clarified, and therefore the car wasn't registered in time. And then the only car that was registered in time for the track day was the M3 Compact. So that was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I think the M3 Compact was basically unprepared for the track day, I would say. I think the car was in good shape. I mean, John made sure it was ready for me. But from what I remember, it was just running something like Hawk HPS pads or something like that. Nothing too fancy. Um, so I went to Spa Francorchamps expecting to drive a much more benign car. Ended up driving this one. I had a great time, of course. I think I also even made a video of it. But I was comparatively relatively slow, I would say. I mean, it was not super slow, but comparing to where I ended up in the car, I was pretty slow. So I started off on that very first track day with a 306. If you want, you can find the video in my other channel down here. But yeah, it was a 307, 306 lap. Nothing special. It was nice and neat, but quite cautious, I would say, when you look at the lap. I only on that track day I only checked pressures before and after the session, and because I was really rusty, I in terms of my driving skills, I needed the car to have more understeer than oversteer, and anytime the car threatened to do any kind of oversteer, I got spooked. I was really spooked and got scared. So For that first track day, I made sure that the rear tire pressure was higher than the front to avoid oversteer. And as mentioned in the video from the track day itself on the racetrack setup channel, once you're actually at the track, there's not that many things you can still do, unless you have adjustable suspension, of course, that you can very quickly do to change the handling blast. And one of the quickest things you can do is actually just play with the tire pressure a little bit. Where if the vehicle, if you want a little bit more understeer, you increase the rear tire pressure a little bit and relative to the front. And if you want a little bit more oversteer, you can make the front tire pressure slightly higher than the rear. So after more than half a year and quite a few track days, I managed to get down to a 252, despite it being in much more slippery conditions. I'll show the video of the lap. Make sure it's not too loud so you can still hear me. So yeah, right out of the first corner you can see but by this point I was pretty in tune with the car and was not afraid of oversteering. Even the Eau Rouge is just a bit of a break, staying in 5th gear. On this particular lap I missed the inside apex, but still dealt with it. Staying in 5th gear, this car had shown the final drive, so I'm trail braking into so indicating left to let the Ford Focus know I'd like to pass, making sure he sees me. He indicates right to know that we stick to the right, so I pass him without losing much time. Heading down to double left. Oh, sorry, yeah, it's like cool. This is cool. Quite a lot of corrections. Really driving a little bit of the car. Here I'm sticking to the inside rather than taking the classical line because there was just a lot of muck and moisture on the outside on the regular line. Here braking early enough to hit the apex of this corner. So mid-corner corrections, steer, and making sure to use all of the track. So this part you might think, well, it's you can just drive it. Actually, no, even here to maximize lap time, you have to drive, make full use of the track. Some oversteer at the exit of Francorchamps. It's quite typical. And then making sure I got my braking done for the bus stop chicane. And be careful with the throttle not to get too much oversteer because you don't too much time on the bus stop chicane in 252.
Because 5G home internet prioritizes.
Sorry about that. So, not sure if you noticed, but what I did have was and it's visible in this video. What I had once so over here you'll see I had this little gadget which was a tire pressure and temperature monitor. This is something that was actually really useful in terms of keeping an eye on the pressure and temperature of the tire, so that the minute you see that the pressure is too high or the temperature of the tire is too high, then you know, okay, I gotta take it easy, cool down the tires a bit so that you don't really destroy your tires in one single session, for example. So if you're not careful, and so say you go on on a track day without something like this, you the only thing you can rely on is the this the feeling you get from the car, in terms of the seat of your pants, and how greasy the tires are getting. But that's really very unscientific. And if you're in the if you're on a good lap, you don't want to stop, and you just keep pushing, and then very quickly you've destroyed a set of tires that cost more than $1,000 or €1,000, and that could have been totally avoided by a €30 little gadget like this. So when I once I had this, and just by feeling what the response from the vehicle in terms of how much grip I have, I always tried to keep the pressure roughly around 2 bar, and temperature always lower than 45 degrees C. So the 45 degrees C is most likely not the it might have been even that my target was less than 40, because the temperature that the little sensor is measuring is the temperature of the air inside the tire. It's not the tire tread itself. So once the temperature of the air inside the tire is already 40 degrees C, it's most likely that the tire tread itself is even hotter. And so if we look at the setup changes I made to the car to get it from 306 down to 252, so improvement of 14 seconds, or even 15 seconds in fact. Obviously it was a driver mod as well. I became much more in tune with the car, much more confident. An example of that would be the fact that I was quite comfortable drifting the car, even 50 corners. So this is fully sideways. The track was wet but dry. Awesome. Fifth gear corner, and then coming down to nice transition. Yeah, I said this was an awesome fourth gear corner. This is really so. So being that comfortable with the car definitely helped improve the lap time, because it means you're exploring. You're much more confident in exploring the limit of the car, and not worried if the rear breaks out. And so if you are able to, so I can definitely recommend taking drift trainings, and say in the winter month when normal track days are not available, keeping your skills sharp using using drift sessions. But in a nutshell, and it sounds super simple, but in essence, what drift training will teach you is that where you look is where you end up. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, but it actually does take a certain amount of concentration to keep doing that. So and especially in the beginning, if you're not used to the car, the rear breaking loose and so on, you definitely initially will look at the things you don't want to hit. But the problem is, once you look at the thing you don't want to hit, you are actually going to head in that direction. And that's kind of what drift training is trying to teach you, as well as a muscle memory. So I think once you're in the flow, once you're really in the zone driving wise, you're looking maybe 3 to 5 seconds ahead of where you need to go, and then when the vehicle is moving around, the tail stepping out, the counter steers and so on, and maybe more importantly, straightening the steering wheel back out once you've corrected the slide. Those should become just pure muscle memory. If you have to think about it, you're already too slow. And this is where just taking your car on drift trainings, drift sessions will definitely help. Okay, so back to the setup changes. So better driver, in much more in tune with the car. I also went to a wider tire. If I could, I would have wanted to go even wider if I could. So as mentioned, I really had to keep an eye on temperatures, and so I think with a wider tire, you're much able to keep the tire temperatures under control if you're really pushing. I think with the 225 width tire, I would overheat them pretty quick, and yeah, they would also wear out as a result pretty quickly. As I got faster and more confident in the car, and started using these semi-slick tires, used a lot more camber than you would want on a road car. So I think from this picture you can really see it. So just quite a large amount of camber in the front of this car. 3.5 negative 3.5 degrees, 2.5 at the back. Initially, on that very first track day, I think it was down maybe 2.5 or maybe 2, with the rear at 1.5. I did add some more toe in. This made it easier to put the power down. And braking was so instead of the standard M3 brakes, I put in VMAX big brake kit. But actually, from the regular E46, looking back, I should have gone for the M3 big brake kit, because for Spa it was still more or less okay. Although on a different lap, I'll show you it really wasn't. Especially relative to the very first track day, I reduced the rear tire pressure a lot for better traction, mainly because I could tell out of the slow corners, La Source, hairpin, and the bus stop, I had traction issues, as mentioned, due to the compact having such a light rear end. But this obviously led to more oversteer, but then I could deal with it, being much more experienced with the car at this point. And yeah, as said earlier, much more active monitoring of the tire pressure, temperature. So I mentioned that the braking was sometimes not sufficient. I'll save you from watching this video. Just maybe skip ahead to the crucial. So this was actually totally missed the corner and not breaking this. Being demonstrated. Coming out of the last turn, and yeah, it ended up being not under 252. But yeah, so this was my journey with the M3 Compact. I think it's probably quite typical. I guess the main the biggest surprise and the thing which really helped a lot for very little cost was the tire pressure monitoring system. So I'm definitely installing that on my new track car. new car, because it's not really very track focused yet. But the tire pressure and temperature monitoring is something I definitely recommend. Yeah, I probably waffled on for long enough. I will probably make one more video on the M3 Compact, mainly for a different track, the which is Zolder. So that's upcoming. Alright, see you next time. Hope this video was informative.